She was called Valeth, the Evermender, the silent pulse of the Mirian star cloisters. Her hands, slender and pale as moonlight on frost, could weave broken bones and cauterize failing hearts with a touch. Across 7 star systems, her name was sung like a hymn, a final hope whispered into the dark by those too weak to stand. She knew every neural pathway of her people, every subtle tremor in a dying cell, every secret crack in a spirit pushed to the brink. To Valeth, illness was simply another pattern to unravel, another puzzle to solve beneath her all-seeing, gentle gaze. But within the silent chambers of her crystal temple, she felt no warmth in her own pulse, no spark behind her glacier-blue eyes. The Mirians revered serenity above all. Laughter was regarded as a sign of mental instability, a dangerous surrender to chaos. A healer's composure had to remain as still as a moonless sea, lest her vibrations upset the delicate equilibrium of her patient's spirits. Decades passed. Valeth never stumbled, never sighed, never let slip a single giggle or grin. She glided from one bed to another, her face smooth and distant as she absorbed the agony of the galaxy's most broken souls. And in the long hours after her final rounds, she sat alone among the crystal gardens, her mind echoing with silent prayers she never voiced aloud. Somewhere deep in her chest, a pulse longed to burst free, to crack the calm veneer, but she had buried it so deeply, she no longer knew its shape. Then came the human, Elias Gannon, an interstellar botanist whose freighter crash-landed on Myria after a meteor storm battered his vessel into ruin. He arrived at the star cloisters on a stretcher, his ribs cracked like splintered branches, lungs rattling dangerously with each breath. Valeth began her examination at once, drifting her luminous fingers over his injuries, mapping pain into color-coded waves only she could see. But when Elias regained consciousness, he did not shrink from her touch as others did. Instead, his eyes opened wide, catching the soft glow of her ethereal robes. In that dazed moment, despite his agony, he laughed, a ragged bark-like burst that echoed off the crystalline walls. Her hands jerked back as though burned. She had heard many sounds in her lifetime, groans, whimpers, final sighs, but never this. You're like a floating glow stick," he wheezed, tears springing to his eyes as he clutched his side, half from pain and half from the sheer absurd joy vibrating through his battered body. Valeth frowned, struggling to stabilize his breathing, but his laughter only intensified. She scanned him again, convinced he must be hallucinating, that fever had corroded his mind. But Elias just grinned at her, a smile bright enough to rival the sun beyond their violet skies. "You look like a star that forgot how to dance," he gasped. She did not understand. A healer's purpose was stillness, unflinching focus, yet his laughter, wild and unsanctioned, seemed to ripple through her composure like a storm striking a placid lake. Over the next cycles, as she tended his wounds, he shared stories of Earth, messy street carnivals where strangers painted each other's cheeks with neon powder, old women snorting so hard at jokes that soup sprayed from their noses, children rolling in mud under sudden summer rains. He told her of evenings by campfires when one poorly timed fart could reduce an entire squad to helpless tears. At first, she reprimanded him, instructing him to conserve breath, to remain calm and dignified. But each night, after she departed, those stories replayed in her mind like forbidden music. She saw flickers of muddy children's smiles as she entered meditative trances. She felt ghostly warmth curling around her ribs where only cool emptiness had dwelled before. One dawn, as she examined his healing ribs, Elias began humming a clumsy tune. No harmonics, no controlled cadence, just a chaotic, heartfelt mess of notes. Something inside Valeth trembled. Without thinking, her mouth twitched upward. A spark danced at the corner of her lips. Elias froze. Then, with a conspiratorial grin, he poked her lightly in the side. She jumped, startled, and that minuscule smile broke into a stifled snort. Her eyes widened in shock, hands flying to her face as though she'd uttered a blasphemy. "It's okay," Elias said softly, his voice like a sunrise through fog. "It's beautiful." A shudder ran through her entire being. As if a dam shattered inside, she burst into a high, crystalline laugh, clear and alien, echoing off the shining walls. Her attendants gathered, horrified, certain their revered healer had lost her mind. But when they saw her eyes shimmering, saw the pure joy flooding her normally frozen features, they did not flee. In that laughter, decades of silent grief and buried questions unraveled. Her composure cracked open like an ancient seed finally kissed by rain. She laughed until her lungs ached, until tears streaked down her luminescent cheeks, until she fell forward against Elias, her forehead pressing into his shoulder. Thank you, she gasped, voice trembling like a newborn flame. I never knew I was so empty. After that day, Vailitha's healing shifted. Where once she soothed only with unyielding calm, she began to hum strange off-key tunes as she worked, her hands shaking with gentle mirth. She painted bright colors on the walls of recovery rooms, taught patients simple silly chants to recite as their bodies knitted themselves whole. Word spread beyond Myria that the Evermender had found a new cure, not in nanites or psionic mapping, but in laughter. Patients who had lost hope began to recover. Those resigned to gray, endless survival rediscovered joy, stubborn as wildflowers in cracks of stone. As Elias finally prepared to return home, Vailith stood among the gardens, now riotous with blooms of impossible hues. She pressed her forehead to his, a farewell born of warmth rather than obligation. You came here broken, she whispered, her voice like starlight threaded with a heartbeat. But you mended something I did not know needed healing. He squeezed her hands, eyes bright with their shared secret. You fix me too, he said. But I guess sometimes the real medicine is a good belly laugh. As his ship rose through the lavender dawn, Vailith turned to her people, her smile radiant enough to split the ancient cold of their collective spirit. For the first time in centuries, the star cloisters rang not with sterile silence but with music, jokes, and uncontainable giggles, the true song of life they never knew they were missing. And among those shimmering towers, once terrified of chaos, the healer who once knew all discovered the most powerful cure of all, the ungovernable, unstoppable joy of a human's laughter.